What happens when a small act of kindness creates ripples that change lives forever? For Maya Thompson, a self-made business leader, returning to the place where her journey began was never part of her plan. But life has a way of calling us back to where we're needed most. When Maya receives an unexpected call about the struggling Carter Community Center, a place that once gave her hope, when she had nothing but dreams, she finds herself at a crossroads. Can she save the center that shaped her future? And more importantly, can she inspire a new generation to rise above their circumstances the way she once did? Faced with doubt, resistance, and old shadows from her past, Maya must rally a community that's all but lost hope. Along the way, she discovers that success isn't about how far you rise, it's about how many you lift with you. The soft hum of airplane engines filled the cabin, a steady vibration beneath Maya Thompson's feet as she settled into her first-class seat. The late afternoon sun slanted through the small oval window, streaking the cabin with hues of gold and orange. Maya exhaled slowly, savoring a brief moment of peace. It was rare, this stillness, when everything around her finally quieted. After an exhausting week of back-to-back meetings and sleepless nights, this flight to Zurich felt like a small reward. Maya's company was on the brink of signing its first international deal, a partnership that could propel her tech business to unprecedented heights. Seat 1A, a window seat with ample space, symbolized more than just comfort. It was a subtle acknowledgement of her success, of years spent building a life she once thought impossible. She reached into her leather briefcase, retrieving a sleek notebook filled with handwritten notes and sketches. It was her personal habit, keeping things written on paper, even in a digital world. The corners of the pages were worn from constant flipping, and her neat handwriting charted out strategies and goals for the deal ahead. As she adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, she glanced briefly at the passengers around her. Designer bags, crisp suits, and faint murmurs of quiet conversation filled the air. For a moment, Maya allowed herself to feel proud. She had built this life from nothing. Her childhood had been spent in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Philadelphia, where her parents worked tirelessly to keep food on the table. Her mother always said, "Do not let anyone decide your worth for you, Maya. You define yourself." Those words echoed in her mind as often as the distant memory of her mother's voice. Maya shook off the thought and focused on the view outside the window. Planes taxied across the tarmac, silhouetted against the setting sun. She leaned back in her seat and took a sip of the sparkling water offered by a flight attendant. For once, everything felt calm. But perfection, Maya knew, was fleeting. A commotion at the front of the cabin caught her attention. A tall woman with platinum blonde hair had just entered, her posture radiating entitlement as she surveyed the rows of seats. The woman wore a crisp beige suit and carried a designer handbag that hung from her arm like a badge of honor. Behind her followed another woman, smaller and less assured, clutching her own handbag tightly. "Here we go," Maya thought, looking away and returning her focus to her notebook. She had dealt with people like this before, people who judged her place in the world long before they learned her name. "Can you believe this seat assignment?" the blonde woman muttered, her voice just loud enough to carry, "Ridiculous. I always get 1A. "Maybe it's just a mistake, Evelyn," her companion whispered nervously. Maya's ears perked up at the name. Evelyn Harper. The kind of name that belonged to country clubs and generational wealth. Maya ignored them, her pen scratching softly across her notebook as she pretended not to hear. Evelyn stopped directly beside Maya's row. Her blue eyes narrowed slightly as they landed on Maya. Evelyn's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the side of her handbag, her frustration barely concealed beneath a practiced smile. "Excuse me," Evelyn said, her voice clipped. Maya looked up calmly. "Yes?" "I think there has been a mistake," Evelyn said, gesturing toward Maya's seat. "This is supposed to be my seat, 1A. Maya tilted her head slightly. This is my seat. I booked it weeks ago. Evelyn's smile remained, but it had sharpened around the edges. You see, I am a Platinum Elite member with this airline. I always get priority seating. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Maya met Evelyn's gaze, unflinching. I understand that, Maya replied, her voice even and measured. But I reserved this seat, and I have the ticket to prove it. Evelyn's companion shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing to avoid conflict, but Evelyn wasn't ready to give up. Perhaps you would be more comfortable elsewhere, she suggested, her voice dripping with false kindness. There are other seats in first class. Maya smiled faintly, though there was no warmth behind it. I am perfectly comfortable where I am. A flight attendant appeared, his neatly pressed uniform lending an air of authority. Is there an issue here? He asked, looking between Maya and Evelyn. Yes, Evelyn said quickly, her tone now dramatic. There has been a mix-up with the seat assignments. I am supposed to be in 1A, but this woman, she waved a dismissive hand toward Maya, is sitting here. The flight attendant turned to Maya, his face polite but slightly unsure. Ma'am, may I see your ticket, please? Without hesitation, Maya handed him her boarding pass. Her heart remained steady. This was not new territory for her. She had spent years proving her place in spaces where she was underestimated, overlooked, or simply unwelcome. This, she told herself, was just another test. The flight attendant examined the ticket and nodded, his expression now apologetic. This is indeed your seat, Miss Thompson. Evelyn's eyes flashed with frustration. That cannot be right, she said sharply. She must have upgraded last minute. People do that, do they not? Maya's patience wore thin, though she remained calm. I did not upgrade. I booked this seat weeks ago. Evelyn opened her mouth to argue further, but her companion tugged gently at her arm, whispering something into her ear. Evelyn ignored her. Do you even know who I am? She asked, her voice low but seething. I do not fly economy. Ever. Maya met her gaze steadily. I suggest you take your assigned seat, she said softly. This conversation is over. The attendant cleared his throat, clearly eager to resolve the situation. Mrs. Harper, if you have concerns, I would be happy to address them after everyone is settled. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line, her anger barely concealed. This is not over, she muttered, but she finally turned and stormed toward the front of the cabin. Her companion followed closely, whispering nervously. The flight attendant gave Maya an apologetic nod. I am sorry about that, ma'am. Thank you, Maya replied with a polite nod, though her expression remained unreadable. As the attendant walked away, Maya allowed herself a quiet exhale. She felt the weight of the other passengers' stares, the silent curiosity that seemed to fill the air like fog. She knew how they saw her. A lone black woman in a seat they assumed was not hers. But she refused to let anyone diminish her. Not today, not ever. Leaning back into her seat, Maya took another sip of sparkling water and turned her attention back to her notebook. A voice broke the silence. Good for you. Maya looked up, startled. Across the aisle, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes smiled at her warmly. People like that, he said softly, shaking his head, always think the world owes them something, but you handled that beautifully. Maya blinked, caught off guard by his quiet kindness. Thank you, she said, surprised at how much his words soothed her. The man chuckled lightly, the lines around his eyes crinkling. Keep holding your ground. You are stronger than you know. For a moment Maya said nothing, but as she turned back to the window, the faint glow of the sunset spreading across the horizon, she felt something unexpected, a small shift, a spark of hope. Sometimes kindness came in the smallest gestures, a warm smile, a gentle word. And yet, its impact could stretch farther than she realized. As the engines roared to life and the plane began to move, Maya leaned back in her seat, calm and resolute. She did not know what awaited her in Zurich, but she knew one thing for sure. She would not let anyone decide her worth for her. Not ever. The city of Zurich sparkled beneath the soft glow of the setting sun as Maya Thompson stepped off the plane and into the crisp Swiss air. The flight's turbulence, both literal and emotional, was now behind her. But the confrontation with Evelyn Harper still lingered in her mind. The older man's unexpected kindness had stayed with her too, a small beacon of reassurance amid a draining encounter. Maya shook it off as she collected her luggage. The flight was over, and there was work to do. Zurich wasn't a destination for leisure. It was the gateway to a deal that could change everything, one that her tech company had been pursuing for nearly a year. This partnership with the European conglomerate, Primedge Technologies, could take her software innovations global. Success meant not only profits, but influence, something she knew could help bring her vision to underserved communities back home. The black sedan waiting for her at the curb felt sterile and efficient, much like the sleek city itself. Maya sank into the back seat, pulling out her notebook. She flipped through the handwritten notes, the meticulous plans she had outlined weeks ago. Each page represented her tireless preparation and late nights, filled with strategies and backup ideas for every potential obstacle. Her phone buzzed. "Jeremy?" Maya answered briskly. "Hey, boss. Just checking in. Did you land okay?" Jeremy, her assistant, always had a way of sounding upbeat no matter the hour. "Yes, I am on my way to the hotel now," Maya replied, staring out at the pristine streets of Zurich as they passed. "How is everything back home?" "All good. The team is running on schedule, and I prepped those final data sheets you asked for. Just give the word if you need anything else." "Thank you, Jeremy." Maya paused, softening her tone. "I appreciate you." Jeremy hesitated for a moment, then chuckled lightly. "You know me always on call. Knock 'em dead tomorrow." Maya smiled faintly as she ended the call, slipping the phone back into her bag. Tomorrow would decide everything. The meeting room on the 21st floor of the Primedge Tower was a study in glass and steel. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering an unobstructed view of Lake Zurich glittering in the distance. The space hummed with quiet professionalism, polished conference tables, spotless white walls, and a hint of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. Maya stood alone at the head of the table, her laptop open as she fine-tuned the presentation she had spent months perfecting. She knew every graph, statistic, and projection by heart. Numbers were predictable, steady, unlike people, she thought with a bitter smile. The door opened, and a group of men and women entered, their sharp suits and clipped strides filling the room with authority. Leading them was Robert Ackerman, a tall, stern-looking executive with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. He extended a hand to Maya. "Miss Thompson, welcome to Zurich." "Thank you, Mr. Ackerman," Maya said, shaking his hand firmly. "It is a pleasure to be here." The others introduced themselves, members of the board, analysts, legal advisors, each person sizing her up with professional neutrality. Maya had faced these rooms before, the silent scrutiny of those who still viewed her as an outsider. She was a black woman in tech, after all, an anomaly in an industry dominated by men who resembled Robert Ackerman more than they did her. As the meeting began, Maya launched into her presentation. Her voice was calm, her tone confident. Slides appeared on the projector, showcasing data-backed projections, innovation strategies, and the potential for growth that this partnership would bring. "Your software provides an efficient, scalable solution for global markets," one of the analysts said, leaning forward. "But we are concerned about leadership capabilities. Scaling at this level requires a certain pedigree." Maya's heart dropped, though her face remained composed. Pedigree. She knew what he meant. Another board member chimed in. Miss Thompson, as impressive as your company's performance has been domestically, we must ask, do you have the experience to oversee such a significant international expansion? Partnering with PrimEdge is no small feat. The words stung. Maya's mind flashed back to Evelyn Harper on the plane, her dismissive tone, her audacity to assume Maya's place was negotiable. Here it was again, the unspoken question. Do you belong here? Maya paused for a beat, gathering herself. I understand your concerns, she said evenly. But let me be clear, my company did not arrive at this moment by accident. My team and I have delivered results consistently, and we are prepared to bring that same commitment and innovation to this partnership. Experience is earned, not inherited. The boardroom fell silent. Ackerman leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he studied her. Maya met his gaze, refusing to look away. A voice broke the silence. If I may, a young woman at the far end of the table said. Maya turned toward her, surprised to see someone who looked no older than 30 seated among the board members. She had dark brown hair pulled into a sleek bun and a nameplate in front of her. Sarah Clark. Sarah stood, her voice clear and confident. I would like to add something. She glanced at Maya, offering a small smile before turning back to the board. Miss Thompson's company partnered with a school in my hometown last year, providing free software and training to low-income students who would not otherwise have access to technology. My younger cousin was one of those students. Today, she is the first person in our family to pursue a degree in computer science. The room stilled. What Maya Thompson brings to the table is not just numbers and projections. She brings vision and real impact. If you are questioning her ability to lead, I suggest you look at the results, not just the ones on paper, but the lives her work has touched. Maya blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the young woman's words. Her chest tightened with emotion as she felt the weight of Sarah's story. For so long she had been focused on survival, on proving herself, that she often forgot to look at the ripples her work created. Robert Ackerman cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Thank you, Sarah, he said evenly. His gaze returned to Maya, softer this time. Miss Thompson, we will need some time to deliberate, but I appreciate your professionalism and preparation today. Maya nodded, offering a polite smile. Thank you for your time. The sun was setting as Maya exited the PrimEdge tower. She walked slowly toward the waiting car, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Her heart felt heavy, her mind replaying the board's skeptical words. Do you have the experience? But then there was Sarah. Her voice had cut through the doubt, carrying something Maya had not expected: kindness. Genuine, unexpected kindness from someone who did not owe her anything. As the car pulled away from the building, Maya glanced out the window. The lake reflected the colors of twilight, soft shades of purple and pink spreading across its surface. She felt a faint stirring of hope. Back at the hotel, Maya kicked off her heels and sank into the armchair by the window. She stared at the Zurich skyline, her notebook resting on her lap, open to an empty page. For the first time in months, she picked up her pen not to write plans or strategies, but to jot down a thought. What matters most is not where you begin, but how far you are willing to go and how many you lift along the way. Her phone buzzed. It was an email. Maya opened it and scanned the message, her breath catching in her throat. Subject: Partnership Approval. Dear Miss Thompson, after careful deliberation, the board of PrimEdge Technologies has unanimously agreed to move forward with your proposal. Maya set the phone down, a small smile breaking across her face. She thought of Sarah Clark, how one voice, one unexpected act of kindness had shifted the tide. Sometimes, the smallest moments could make the biggest difference. Maya Thompson leaned back against the plush seat in her Zurich hotel room, the glow of the skyline stretching beyond her window. She had done it. The deal with PrimEdge Technologies was signed, sealed, and celebrated. The email confirming their partnership still lingered in her inbox, a testament to years of relentless effort. And yet, as she sat there in the quiet of the room, Maya couldn't help but think about what had made the difference. It wasn't her perfect data projections or her polished pitch. It had been Sarah Clark, one person who spoke up with sincerity and unexpected kindness. That moment played in her mind like a song stuck on repeat, stirring something deep within her. Maya knew all too well how hard it was for someone to advocate for you, especially when others had already decided who you were. The faint hum of her phone broke the silence. Maya's assistant, Jeremy, was calling. "Jeremy," she answered, her voice even. "Hey boss, just checking in. I heard the good news from the team. Prim Edge is locked in, huh?" Jeremy's voice carried that contagious enthusiasm that always made her smile. "Yes, the deal is done," Maya replied, a touch of relief finally breaking through her tone. "Thank you for everything, Jeremy. I mean that." "No need to thank me, Maya. You earned this." Jeremy paused, and Maya could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. "Listen, a letter arrived for you at the office today. It looked kind of old-fashioned, handwritten and all. I scanned it and emailed it to you." "A letter?" Maya asked, surprised. "Yeah. Weird, right? It is from someone named Patricia. I think she's a teacher. Anyway, it seemed important, so check your inbox when you have a minute." Maya frowned slightly. A handwritten letter felt strange in an age of emails, texts, and video calls. She ended the call with Jeremy and opened her laptop. A new email appeared in her inbox with the subject line, "Letter Scan," from Patricia Monroe. She clicked on it, and the scanned image of the letter appeared. The neat, cursive handwriting was instantly familiar to her, so familiar that it made her chest tighten. "Dear Maya Thompson, I hope this letter finds you well. My name may not stand out to you, but you might remember me as Ms. Monroe, your fifth-grade teacher at the Carter School. I have been following your success from afar, and I must say, you have made all of us proud here in your old neighborhood. I am reaching out to let you know that the Carter School is hosting a special career day for our students in 2 weeks. It has been years since you walked these halls, but the students still talk about you like a legend, someone who left this place and made it big. The truth is, they need to see someone like you. Many of these kids are facing the same challenges you once did, and they are losing hope. Your story could light a fire in them. I know you are a busy woman, Maya, but if there is any way you can spare the time, we would be honored to have you. Warm regards, Ms. Patricia Monroe." Maya sat still, the words hanging in the air long after she finished reading. She had not thought about Ms. Monroe in years, but memories of that classroom came rushing back. The cracked blackboards, the smell of old textbooks, the way Ms. Monroe would encourage her when no one else did. "Maya, you have a mind that can take you anywhere," she used to say, standing beside Maya's desk with a warm smile. "Do not let anyone clip your wings." For a moment, Maya felt transported back to those days. The 2-bedroom apartment, her parents working late shifts just to keep the lights on, the dreams she had scribbled into a worn notebook because dreaming out loud felt too risky. And yet here she was, successful, respected, sitting in a luxury hotel room halfway across the world. How far she had come. Still, the idea of returning home made her uneasy. She had spent so many years building this life that stepping back into her old neighborhood felt like opening a door she had deliberately locked. What would they expect from her? What could she possibly say that would matter? The soft buzz of her phone broke through her thoughts again. It was Jeremy, sending another message. "Should I RSVP for you?" "Let me know," Maya sighed, closing her laptop. A part of her wanted to say no. It would be easier to send a donation or a recorded message. But Miss Monroe's words lingered. "They need to see someone like you." The flight back to Philadelphia was unremarkable. a stark contrast to the tension-filled journey to Zurich just days earlier. Maya had made a point to keep her head down, headphones in, letting the steady hum of the engines calm her nerves. As the taxi turned onto the narrow streets of her old neighborhood, Maya's chest tightened. The cracked sidewalks and faded storefronts looked much the same as when she had left. A group of teenagers clustered near the corner store, laughing and shouting to one another, their voices echoing off the brick buildings. The Carter School stood at the end of the block, its once red bricks now faded to a dull brown. Maya climbed out of the taxi, clutching her leather bag tightly as she approached the front doors. The sound of children's chatter and sneakers squeaking down the halls hit her like a wave. She was greeted by Ms. Monroe, now grayer, but no less radiant. The teacher smiled warmly, her arms open for a hug. "Maya Thompson," she said softly, as though saying her name was a blessing. "You came." "Of course I did, Ms. Monroe," Maya said, smiling back as they embraced. They walked down the hallway, where posters of famous figures adorned the walls. Martin Luther King Jr., Maya Angelou, and even Maya herself, her photo clipped from an old business magazine. "I didn't know you kept that," Maya murmured, stopping in front of her picture. "Your story gives these kids hope, Maya," Miss Monroe replied, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It reminds them that there is more waiting for them outside these walls." In the small auditorium, students filed into plastic chairs, their voices filling the space with excitement. Maya stood at the podium, scanning the room. Most of the faces staring back at her were young and uncertain, much like hers had been at their age. She began speaking, her voice steady but soft. "When I was your age, I sat in these same chairs. I faced the same struggles, the same doubts. People told me I would never make it because of where I came from. But what I want you to know is this: your circumstances do not define you. They challenge you. They sharpen you." As she spoke, the room grew quieter. Maya's words began to flow more easily, the hesitation melting away. "You are stronger than you realize. And one day, you will look back at this moment and see that every struggle you faced taught you how to fly." A hand shot up near the front. It belonged to a young girl, no older than 10, with bright eyes and dark braids. "How did you know you could do it?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Maya paused, the question pulling at her heart. "I did not always know," she admitted softly, "but I had people who believed in me, my parents, my teachers like Ms. Monroe. Their kindness gave me the courage to believe in myself." The girl nodded thoughtfully, her eyes full of quiet wonder. When the speech ended, the students erupted in applause, some even lining up to talk to her. As Maya spoke to them one by one, she felt something shift within her. It was as if she had come full circle, reconnecting with the part of herself she had nearly forgotten. Before leaving, the young girl approached Maya again and handed her a piece of folded paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly. Maya unfolded it and smiled. The drawing was simple but profound. A girl with wings standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to take flight. At the bottom, the words read, "You taught me how to fly." Maya's throat tightened as she clutched the paper. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Walking back toward the taxi, Maya felt lighter, as though the weight she carried had eased. For so long, she had thought success meant leaving her past behind. But maybe success was returning to where you started and lifting others up with you. The steady hum of the taxi's engine was the only sound as Maya Thompson stared out the window, the streets of her childhood rolling by in soft blurs of faded brick buildings, peeling paint, and corner stores still clinging to life. The drawing the little girl had given her sat folded carefully in her lap. Maya's fingers traced its edges absent-mindedly, the words at the bottom replaying in her mind, "You taught me how to fly." The memory of her speech at the Carter School lingered like a distant echo. She had not expected to feel so much standing in that auditorium, looking into the faces of children who mirrored her own struggles, who looked to her as proof that it was possible to escape, to rise. A part of her wondered how many of them would actually believe it. When she was their age, hope had been a fragile thing. The taxi pulled up to the curb outside an aging two-story apartment building, the same one she had grown up in. Maya hesitated for a moment before stepping out, her heels clicking softly against the cracked sidewalk. She had not been back to this place in years, and the sight of it stirred emotions she had long buried. The steps leading to the entrance were still chipped, and the paint on the door was faded to a dull blue. She climbed the stairs, her footsteps light but deliberate. A part of her wondered what she was doing here, why she felt the need to visit after all this time. Maybe it was the little girl's drawing. Maybe it was seeing Ms. Monroe again. Or maybe, Maya realized, it was because a part of her had been missing, and coming back here was the only way to find it. Her old apartment had been on the second floor, third door on the left. She stopped in front of it, running her fingers over the faded numbers 3B. Memories pushed their way to the surface. The smell of her mother's cooking drifting into the hall, her father's laughter filling the tiny living room, the sound of her younger self scribbling furiously in her notebook at the kitchen table. The door beside her creaked open, pulling her from her thoughts. An older woman stepped out, her face lined with age but softened by a warm smile. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" the woman asked kindly. Maya turned, startled for a moment before recognizing her. "Mrs. Jenkins?" The woman squinted, and then her eyes widened with recognition. "Maya Thompson. Goodness, I thought you looked familiar." Mrs. Jenkins, who had lived in 3A for as long as Maya could remember, beamed at her. "Look at you, all grown up and fancy. I heard you were doing big things out in the world." Maya smiled faintly. "It has been a while." "More than a while," Mrs. Jenkins teased, though her voice was soft with affection. She looked Maya up and down, taking in her tailored coat, her polished shoes, and the leather bag slung over her shoulder. "You made it, didn't you?" "I suppose I did," Maya replied, though the words felt heavier than she expected. Mrs. Jenkins tilted her head, studying her closely. "It is good to see you back here, Maya. Places like this, well, they have a way of holding on to people, even when they leave." Maya nodded, a strange lump rising in her throat. "Do you know who lives here now?" she asked, gesturing to 3B. "A family with 2 little boys," Mrs. Jenkins said. "Sweet kids. Their mama works 2 jobs just like your folks did." She paused, her voice softening. "Life has not changed much for most people here. But seeing you, you give folks hope, Maya. You really do." Maya felt her throat tighten further. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins," she managed to say. The older woman patted her arm gently. "You take care of yourself, sweetheart, and do not be a stranger, you hear?" Maya nodded, offering a faint smile as she turned back down the stairs. The weight of Mrs. Jenkins' words sat heavy on her shoulders. As she reached the street, Maya paused and looked back at the building one last time. She could still see herself as a little girl, sitting by the window late at night, staring at the distant lights of the city and dreaming of something more. You give folks hope. It was strange, she thought, how you could leave a place but still carry it with you. The next morning, Maya sat in the corner booth of a small diner, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The diner had not changed much since her childhood. The cracked vinyl seats and buzzing neon sign were exactly as she remembered, and the smell of frying bacon and brewed coffee brought a flood of memories. She had spent countless mornings here with her father before school, eating pancakes and listening to him talk about his dreams for her. "You are going to be someone important, Maya," he used to say, his voice full of quiet conviction. "I just know it." Maya sighed, staring into her coffee as those words echoed in her mind. "You look lost in thought," a voice said, breaking through her reverie. Maya looked up to see a man standing near the booth, smiling warmly. He was tall, with silver hair and kind eyes, Henry Dawson, the older man from her flight. "Mr. Dawson," Maya said, startled, "what are you doing here?" "Please, call me Henry," he said, sliding into the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. "And as for what I am doing here, let's just say fate has an odd way of crossing paths." Maya raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Fate?" Henry chuckled. "Well, maybe not fate. I heard you were speaking at the Carter School, and I thought I would stop by to listen. You have a way with words, you know." Maya's smile faded slightly, her expression turning thoughtful. "I do not know about that," she admitted softly. "I just told them the truth." "And that is exactly why it matters," Henry said, his tone gentle but firm. "People do not need polished speeches. They need honesty. They need hope." Maya looked away, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Hope is hard to hold on to in a place like this." Henry leaned back, studying her carefully. "You held on to it, didn't you?" Maya hesitated. "Barely." "But you did," Henry said, his voice steady. "And now you are in a position to help others do the same." Maya looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. For so long, she had focused on her own journey on proving herself, on rising above the circumstances she had been born into. But now, sitting in this diner, surrounded by the echoes of her past, she realized that rising alone was not enough. "What brought you to the Carter School?" she asked softly, changing the subject. Henry smiled faintly. "Let's just say I believe in people like you, Maya. People who know what it is like to struggle and still find a way to soar. I have seen what happens when kindness is shared, even in small ways. It creates ripples." Maya sat in silence for a moment, his words sinking in. Henry's quiet kindness, first on the plane and now here, felt like the nudge she did not know she needed. "Ripples," Maya repeated softly. "Exactly," Henry said with a nod. "You never know whose life you might change by simply showing up." Maya glanced down at the folded drawing in her bag, the image of the girl with wings still fresh in her mind. She thought about Ms. Monroe, about Mrs. Jenkins, about the little girl who had given her that picture. Maybe Henry was right. Maybe it was not enough to rise alone. "I think you are right," Maya said finally, a quiet determination settling over her. Henry smiled knowingly, as though he could see the shift happening within her. "Good. Because there is a lot of work to be done, Maya, and something tells me you are just getting started." Maya looked out the diner window, the streets of her old neighborhood stretching out before her. For the first time in years, she did not see limits or barriers. She saw possibilities, ripples waiting to begin. The familiar sound of a ringing phone startled Maya awake. The hotel room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the city skyline outside. She squinted at the clock on the nightstand, 2:13 a.m. For a moment, disoriented, she forgot where she was. The soft weight of exhaustion from her trip home still lingered in her bones. The phone rang again. Maya groaned, pushing herself up against the pillows as she reached for her cell. Calls this late were rarely good news. "Hello?" she said, her voice groggy. "Maya, it's Ms. Monroe," came a familiar voice on the other end, her tone unsteady. "Ms. Monroe?" Maya sat up straighter, the sound of her old teacher's voice pulling her into full wakefulness. "What is it? What's wrong?" There was a pause, and then Ms. Monroe sighed softly, as though choosing her words carefully. "It's the community center, Maya. They're closing it." Maya froze, her heartbeat suddenly loud in her ears. "What do you mean, closing it?" "The funding is gone," Ms. Monroe replied, her voice carrying the weight of defeat. "The board announced it today. The Carter Community Center will shut its doors in 2 weeks unless something changes." Maya gripped the phone tightly, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. "But the center is everything to that neighborhood. It's where kids go after school. It's where I—" She stopped herself, the words catching in her throat. I know, Maya, Ms. Monroe said gently, as though she could hear the emotion in her voice. It's where you learn to dream, just like so many others. But dreams need resources, and right now, no one is stepping up. The line fell quiet for a moment. Maya's thoughts raced. She remembered those afternoons spent in the center's small computer lab, fingers tapping keys as she taught herself basic coding. The center had given her her first tools, her first sense of possibility. It had been a sanctuary when her world felt too small, too constrained. Why didn't anyone say something sooner? Maya asked, her voice low, almost accusing. We tried, Ms. Monroe replied, a quiet sadness in her tone. The neighborhood has been struggling for years, Maya. People have given up on us. But when you came back to the Carter School, when you gave that speech, she hesitated. It was the first time in a long time that people felt hope. That's why I called you. I know it's asking a lot, but… You don't have to say it, Maya interrupted softly. I understand. Ms. Monroe exhaled, relief coloring her voice. Thank you, Maya. Even if you can't save it, just trying means the world to us. When Maya hung up the phone, she sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the city lights outside her window. Sleep was impossible now. She rubbed her temples, trying to think clearly. Her thoughts flickered back to the diner that morning, to Henry Dawson's words, "You never know whose life you might change by simply showing up." She felt it then, something bigger than herself pulling at her. The next morning, Maya sat at the desk in her hotel room, staring at a spreadsheet of numbers on her laptop. Her mind was a battlefield of ideas and doubt. Saving the Carter Community Center was not a matter of writing a check. A short-term fix would not solve the problem. What they needed was a sustainable solution, something that would keep the doors open for years to come. But the obstacles felt enormous. Where would she find the money? Who would support the center? Maya had spent her entire career navigating boardrooms, where the bottom line was king. Philanthropy, while noble, was never a priority. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Jeremy. Morning, boss, he said when she picked up. Just checking in. You doing okay? Maya hesitated before answering. No, not really, she admitted, leaning back in her chair. The community center where I grew up is shutting down, Jeremy. I don't even know where to start to save it. Jeremy was quiet for a moment. The Carter Community Center? You used to talk about that place all the time. It's where you learned to code, right? Yes, Maya replied softly. It's where I learned everything. There was a pause before Jeremy spoke again, his voice calm but insistent. Then you'll save it. I know you, Maya. You don't back down from a challenge. Not ever. Maya smiled faintly. Jeremy's belief in her was a steadying force, something she had come to rely on over the years. It's not just about saving it, she said, more to herself than to him. It's about making it last. And you'll figure out a way to do that too, Jeremy said confidently. You always do. When the call ended, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. Jeremy was right, she did not back down. She could not. Later that afternoon, Maya found herself sitting in the sunlit office of Henry Dawson. After their conversation at the diner, he had given her his card, insisting she call him if she ever needed guidance. Now here she was, unfolding her worries to a man who seemed to listen, not just with his ears, but with his heart. I need to save the center, Maya said, her voice steady despite the storm swirling inside her. But I don't want to patch a crack in the wall. I want to rebuild the foundation so it never falls apart again. Henry leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze fixed on her. And how do you plan to do that? Maya looked down at her notebook, where she had scribbled ideas all morning. Through a technology initiative, the center's biggest strength was always access. When I was a kid, it gave me access to computers and a space to learn. If we modernize it, bring in new technology, create mentorship programs, and teach marketable skills, we can give kids opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. Henry nodded thoughtfully. It's ambitious, but I like it. You're not just trying to save the center. You're trying to transform it. That's the idea, Maya replied. But I can't do it alone. I'll need funding, partnerships, and people who believe in the vision. Henry smiled, his kind eyes glinting with something like pride. Maya, you're asking for help, but you don't realize how much you've already given. People will support this because you're proof that it works. You are the success story, the ripple. Maya blinked, startled by his words. She had never seen herself that way, as someone whose story could inspire others. But Henry was right. She was the proof. I'll make some calls, Henry continued. I have connections who would be eager to back something like this, and I'll personally donate to get things started. Maya's throat tightened. Henry, thank you. He waved a hand dismissively. Don't thank me yet. There's still work to do. Maya smiled, her confidence growing. I'm ready. That night, as Maya sat in her hotel room, she drafted the proposal for the Carter Community Center initiative. The words poured out of her like a flood. Detailed plans for new technology labs, coding workshops, scholarships, and career mentorship programs. She outlined funding projections and partnerships. She described how the center would not just survive, but thrive as a beacon of hope for generations to come. When she finished, she leaned back and exhaled deeply, her heart beating with purpose. She could see it clearly now, the ripples spreading outward, one life at a time. Before turning off the light, Maya unfolded the little girl's drawing from the Carter School. She stared at the image of the girl with wings, standing at the edge of a cliff. You taught me how to fly. Maya smiled softly, setting the drawing on the nightstand beside her. Tomorrow, she would begin the fight to save the center, and this time, she would not stop until it was done. The morning air felt sharp and clear as Maya stood outside the Carter Community Center, its familiar brick facade looking far more worn than she remembered. For years, this place had been a sanctuary, a safe harbor where kids like her could find moments of escape, hope, and possibility. Now, it sat quiet and tired, its windows streaked with grime, its entrance faded from years of sun and rain. Maya tucked her hands into the pockets of her coat, her breath clouding in the cold air. She had spent the past 2 days working through the proposal she shared with Henry Dawson and a few of his contacts. It was ambitious, maybe even overwhelming, but Maya knew it was the right plan. This center didn't just need saving. It needed rebuilding. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her focus. Turning, she saw Ms. Monroe walking toward her, a warm smile lighting up her lined face despite the chill. Maya, Ms. Monroe said, pulling her into a hug. It's so good to see you back here. I can't tell you how much this means to everyone. Thank you for calling me, Maya replied sincerely. This place gave me my start. I couldn't just stand by and let it disappear. As they stepped inside the center, Maya was hit with the familiar smell of old linoleum and dust. The rooms were smaller than she remembered, the peeling paint and broken chairs a harsh contrast to the memories she carried of this place. The computer lab, where she had spent so many hours teaching herself coding, sat silent now, empty desks and outdated machines gathering dust in the corners. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. It was hard to see a place that had once been full of energy and possibility reduced to this. She turned to Ms. Monroe. We're going to fix it, she said softly, the quiet determination in her voice unmistakable. Ms. Monroe nodded, pride shining in her eyes. I know you will. The next few days passed in a whirlwind. Maya met with local leaders, small business owners, and families from the community, presenting her plan to modernize the center. She explained how the technology labs, workshops, and mentorship programs could provide real opportunities for the next generation skills that could change lives, just as they had changed hers. Her days were packed with back-to-back meetings, often filled with doubt or hesitation. Some community members were skeptical, their faces lined with weariness. Years of broken promises had made them cautious. They had seen plans come and go, ideas that started with fanfare but ended in disappointment. In one meeting, an older man named Mr. Reed spoke up, his gruff voice cutting through the room. "Miss Thompson, we've heard speeches like this before. People come in here with fancy words and promises, but they don't stick around when things get tough. What makes you any different?" Maya paused, letting his words settle before responding. "I understand your doubts, Mr. Reed. I grew up here, right down the street. This center gave me the tools I needed to build a life I never thought possible. I'm not here to make promises and disappear. I'm here because I owe it to this place, to all of you, to give back what it gave me." She looked around the room, meeting the tired, skeptical gazes with steady resolve. "You don't have to take my word for it. Watch me. I'm going to do this, and I won't stop until it's done." A murmur spread through the crowd, and Maya could see the faintest flicker of hope in a few faces. Mr. Reed grunted, crossing his arms over his chest. "We'll see," he muttered, though there was a glint of curiosity in his eyes now. Later that afternoon, Maya sat at a small folding table in the center's old gymnasium, poring over the latest numbers with Jeremy, who had flown in to help. Papers and folders were spread across the table, a mix of funding estimates, partnership proposals, and timelines. Jeremy pushed his glasses up on his nose, his usual upbeat energy dimmed by exhaustion. "You know this isn't going to be easy, right? Some of these companies aren't biting. They're worried the center won't be profitable enough for their donations." Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's not about profit. It's about impact. Why is that so hard for people to see?" "Because they're looking at spreadsheets, not lives," Jeremy replied. He paused, glancing at her. "But you'll get through to them. You always do." Before Maya could respond, a voice called out from the doorway. "Need a hand?" Maya looked up to see Mr. Reed standing there, his sleeves rolled up, a toolbox clutched in one hand. "What are you doing here?" Maya asked, startled. Mr. Reed shrugged, his expression gruff but kind. "Figured if you're serious about fixing this place, you'll need some help. I may not know much about computers, but I can patch up walls and fix broken tables." Maya felt a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. "Thank you, Mr. Reed." "Don't thank me yet," he said, stepping inside. "There's a lot of work to do." Over the next few weeks, something extraordinary began to happen. Word of Maya's plans spread through the neighborhood, and little by little, people started showing up. Mr. Reed led a small team of volunteers who patched walls, painted rooms, and fixed broken fixtures. Local business owners donated supplies, cans of paint, boxes of nails, and furniture they no longer needed. Henry Dawson's connections came through as well. He secured a generous donation that funded the first phase of the tech lab upgrades, brand new computers, coding software, and desks for the students. Maya spent countless hours coordinating everything, balancing meetings with donors and rolling up her sleeves to help with the renovations herself. One afternoon, as Maya helped a group of volunteers clean out the old computer lab, Ms. Monroe appeared at the doorway with two small boys in tow. "These two were asking if they could take a look," she said with a smile. The boys stepped inside, their wide eyes taking in the room as the volunteers carried in shiny new computers. One of them, no older than 10, pointed to the machines and asked shyly, "Can we use those?" Maya crouched down to his level, smiling warmly. "Not just yet, but soon this will be a place where you can learn anything you want: coding, design, whatever you dream about." The boy's eyes sparkled. "Like games?" Maya laughed softly. "Sure, like games. But I'll let you in on a secret. If you learn how to code, you can make your own games." "Really?" the boy whispered, his excitement barely contained. "Really," Maya replied. "You can build anything you put your mind to." As the boys ran off, their laughter echoing through the hall. Maya felt her chest tighten with emotion. She saw herself in them, hungry for opportunity, for knowledge, for a chance to dream. This was why she was here. The final day of renovations arrived, and the center buzzed with energy. Volunteers swept floors and polished windows, while Mr. Reed hammered the last nail into a repaired bench. Maya stood in the middle of the gym, watching everything come together. Jeremy walked up beside her, grinning. "Look at this place. You really did it." Maya shook her head, smiling softly. "We did it. All of us." Mr. Reed passed by, wiping his hands on a rag. "Not bad, Thompson. Not bad at all." "High praise coming from you," Maya teased, earning a chuckle from the older man. Ms. Monroe appeared with a clipboard, her face glowing with pride. "Tomorrow's reopening ceremony is going to be something special, Maya. The whole neighborhood is coming to see what you've done." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of it all settle over her. Tomorrow, the center would open its doors again, not just as a building, but as a symbol of hope. As she looked around, Maya thought of Henry's words. "It creates ripples." This was what he meant. One small act of kindness, one determined effort, could grow into something bigger than you ever imagined. Tomorrow she would see those ripples begin to spread. The morning of the reopening dawned crisp and clear. Maya stood outside the Carter Community Center, watching as people from the neighborhood began to gather. Some walked with quiet curiosity, unsure what to expect, while others chatted excitedly, pointing to the fresh paint on the building's facade, or the new sign that read, "Carter Community Center, a place to dream." The name had been Maya's idea. She wanted the center to reflect its true purpose, giving children the space to imagine a future beyond the narrow streets of their neighborhood. A place where possibilities outshone limits. Maya smoothed her coat and inhaled deeply, feeling a mix of pride and nerves. Today was the culmination of weeks of work, partnerships, and tireless effort. It had taken long days, late nights, and the patience of an entire community to breathe life back into this place. But standing here now, surrounded by people who had stepped up to make it happen, Maya felt a quiet sense of victory. "Not bad for a kid from 3B, a gruff voice said from behind her. Maya turned, smiling as Mr. Reed approached. He was dressed in his best Sunday coat, though his rough hands still showed signs of the work he had put into the center's transformation. "Not bad at all," Maya replied. Mr. Reed grunted, though his smile gave him away. "People are talking, you know." The early morning sunlight spilled across the Carter Community Center, painting it in warm hues of gold. The newly installed sign gleamed, almost as if it understood its significance, "A place to dream." Fresh flowers in pots lined the entrance, volunteers adding final touches to the path leading inside. Maya stood back, arms crossed over her chest, watching as everything came together. The months of long nights, negotiations, and backbreaking work had led to this day, the official reopening of the community center. Kids would now have a place to go after school, a place to explore, to dream, to build. She could feel the energy in the air, the promise of something bigger than herself. Jeremy emerged from the front doors, grinning broadly. "The news station just set up. You're going to be on camera, boss." Maya sighed with mock exasperation. "Great, just what I wanted, another interview." Jeremy chuckled. "You're the face of all this, Maya. People need to see it was you who made this happen." "It wasn't just me," Maya replied firmly, glancing over at the team of volunteers still bustling around. Mr. Reed directed a few men as they set up folding chairs in the courtyard, and Ms. Monroe chatted with parents near the doors. This was a group effort. "And that's why you're a great leader," Jeremy said with a grin. "You actually mean that." Maya smiled faintly, but before she could respond, a young girl ran up to her, clutching a freshly folded flyer in her hands. "Miss Thompson!" Maya turned, recognizing the bright eyes and braids of Olivia, the little girl who had given her the drawing weeks earlier. "Good morning, Olivia. Are you excited about today? The girl nodded eagerly, holding out the flyer. Look, my mom said I could help pass these out. It tells everyone about the new classes. I want to join the coding one. Maya crouched down, taking the flyer with care. The bold letters read, New programs for young dreamers, coding, robotics, and design. You'll be the first one to sign up, Maya said with a warm smile. And when you build your first program, you have to show it to me, okay? Olivia nodded, her face beaming. I will. I promise. As the girl ran off to continue her task, Maya rose, feeling a swell of pride in her chest. This moment was why she had fought so hard. She had been Olivia once, holding on to big dreams that felt impossible. But now, Maya could see the future stretching out for kids like her. By mid-morning, the crowd had grown larger than Maya had expected. Families filled the courtyard, children darting between clusters of adults, their laughter rising above the hum of conversation. Parents exchanged hopeful words with volunteers, while local reporters gathered at the edge of the stage, cameras poised to capture the event. Maya stood near the podium, her fingers tracing the edges of the note cards in her hand. She glanced over at the newly renovated building, the tech lab she had poured her heart into, the fresh paint on the walls, the polished floors that gleamed in the sunlight. It was not just a building anymore, it was a statement. Jeremy nudged her gently. You ready? She took a deep breath, her nerves settling. Ready as I'll ever be. Ms. Monroe stepped up to the microphone, her voice carrying across the courtyard. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for the grand reopening of the Carter Community Center. This building has been a cornerstone of our neighborhood for generations, and today it begins a new chapter 1 full of possibilities. Applause broke out, and Ms. Monroe stepped back, gesturing to Maya. Maya walked to the podium, her heels clicking softly against the wooden stage. As she looked out over the crowd, faces young and old, hopeful and unsure, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. Good morning, everyone, Maya began, her voice strong and clear. When I was a little girl, I walked through the doors of this community center for the first time. I did not know much about computers or coding back then, but what I did know was that I wanted to learn, to dream, to build something bigger than myself. This place gave me that opportunity, and it changed my life forever. She paused, scanning the crowd. A few faces looked up at her, nodding in quiet agreement. For too long, places like this have been neglected, overlooked, as if the people inside don't matter. But that's not true. This community matters. These children matter. And today, we are proving that when you invest in people, the possibilities are endless. The crowd erupted into applause, some people even cheering. Maya smiled, her heart full as she continued. This center is not just about computers or classrooms. It's about dreams. It's about giving every child who walks through these doors the chance to imagine a better future for themselves. Whether it's coding their first program, designing their first project, or building confidence that will last a lifetime, this is a place where they can grow and believe in themselves. Maya's gaze drifted toward Olivia, who stood at the front of the crowd holding her mother's hand. The little girl's eyes shone with pride. To everyone who showed up, volunteered, and believed in this vision, thank you, Maya concluded. This center belongs to all of you, and I hope you'll keep showing up because this is just the beginning. The applause rose again, louder this time, echoing through the courtyard. Maya stepped back, the cheers and smiles lifting her spirits higher than she thought possible. As the event carried on, Maya moved through the crowd, shaking hands and thanking families for their support. The new computer lab opened its doors, and groups of children poured inside, their faces lighting up at the rows of sleek monitors and the colorful posters that lined the walls. Volunteers sat with them, guiding their small hands on the keyboards, teaching them basic commands. Standing in the doorway, Maya watched as Olivia sat at one of the computers, her fingers hovering tentatively over the keys. She bit her lip in concentration, then grinned as the screen responded to her first successful command. "That's it," Maya heard one of the volunteers say. "You did it." Olivia turned, her face radiant, and waved to Maya. "Look, I did it!" Maya waved back, her smile soft and full of pride. She knew what this moment meant. She had lived it herself. By the end of the afternoon, the event began to wind down. Parents ushered their children home, volunteers gathered the chairs, and the news crews packed up their equipment. The sunlight began to soften, bathing the center in a warm glow. Maya stood on the steps of the building, looking out over the quieting courtyard. Henry Dawson appeared beside her, his hands tucked into his coat pockets as he surveyed the scene. "You did something incredible here, Maya," Henry said softly. Maya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I didn't do it alone. This community, these people, they made it happen." Henry looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, it's funny. The first time we met on that plane, I could tell you were someone who wouldn't back down, but I didn't know you'd turn that quiet strength into something like this." Maya turned to him, her expression serious but warm. "I think sometimes people just need someone to show them it's possible, someone to believe in them." Henry smiled faintly. "Ripples," he said, repeating the word he had shared weeks ago. "Ripples," Maya agreed. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Maya looked back at the Carter Community Center, the sign above the door glowing faintly in the evening light. She thought of all the children who would walk through those doors, their futures still unwritten. It had started with her, years ago, a little girl with big dreams and no clear path. Now, the circle was complete. The ripples were spreading, and Maya knew they would continue long after her work was done. "Come on," Henry said, gesturing toward the parking lot. "You've earned a rest." Maya smiled, taking one last look at the center. The sound of children's laughter still echoed faintly in the distance, and she let it carry her forward. This is just the beginning, she thought. And in her heart, she knew it was true. Maya Thompson sat at her office desk in New York, the skyline stretching endlessly outside the window. The faint hum of traffic far below seeped through the glass, a quiet rhythm she had grown accustomed to over the years. The success of the Carter Community Center reopening had been celebrated, documented, and shared across headlines both local and national. For the first time, Maya's story was not just about her success, but about the lives she was helping shape. Her desk was cluttered with reports and documents detailing the center's progress over the last 3 months. Enrollment in the coding and mentorship programs had skyrocketed. Children who once wandered aimlessly after school now had a safe place to learn. Volunteers had doubled, and local businesses began sponsoring classes and donating supplies. Maya knew this was only the beginning. The faint knock on her office door broke her focus. Jeremy poked his head inside, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. "You've got a call coming in. Pretty important." "Who is it?" Maya asked, closing the file she had been reviewing. Jeremy smirked. "The governor's office." Maya blinked, her pulse quickening slightly. "The governor?" Jeremy gave her a thumbs up. "Line 2. Sounds like your work's getting noticed, boss." Maya picked up the phone, pressing the button for line 2. "This is Maya Thompson." A smooth voice filled the line, steady and professional. "Ms. Thompson, this is Governor Harris. I wanted to personally congratulate you on the incredible work you've done at the Carter Community Center." "Thank you, Governor," Maya replied, her voice calm despite the thrill coursing through her. "That means a lot." "I've been following your progress," Governor Harris continued. "It's inspiring to see someone use their success to give back. We've been looking into ways to invest in community initiatives across the state, and your program could serve as a model." Maya sat up straighter, her mind already racing. "I'd be happy to share everything we've developed, the programs, partnerships, and structure. It's a system that can be replicated." "That's exactly what we're hoping for," Governor Harris said. If you're open to it, I'd like to invite you to present your work at the next State Education Summit. There will be state officials, business leaders, and educators from across the region. You might inspire even more change. Maya hesitated for only a moment before answering. I'd be honored. Wonderful. My team will send you the details, Governor Harris said warmly. And Ms. Thompson, keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more leaders like you. When the call ended, Maya sat back in her chair, letting the governor's words sink in. A year ago, she could never have imagined this being seen not just as a business leader, but as someone who could inspire real change. She glanced at the framed drawing on the shelf beside her desk, Olivia's picture of the girl with wings, ready to take flight. You taught me how to fly. Maya smiled softly, determination hardening in her chest. The State Education Summit was held in Albany, a sprawling conference attended by lawmakers, educators, and business leaders. Maya walked through the Grand Convention Center with Jeremy by her side, her nerves buzzing just beneath the surface. She had presented to investors and tech executives countless times, but this felt different. This was about more than profits or performance. This was about children who deserved a chance to dream, to thrive. Don't be nervous, Jeremy said, nudging her lightly. You've got this. Just tell them what you've done. Maya offered a small smile. I'm not nervous. She paused, searching for the right words. I need them to believe in it. Jeremy grinned. They will. When Maya stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Rows of suits and stern faces stared back at her, waiting. But as Maya adjusted the microphone, she reminded herself who she was really speaking for: children like Olivia, kids sitting in dim classrooms dreaming of a future they could not yet see. Good morning, Maya began, her voice strong and steady. My name is Maya Thompson, and I am the founder of Thompson Tech and the recent partner in the rebuilding of the Carter Community Center in Philadelphia. Today, I want to talk about how opportunity can change lives, because I know this firsthand. She paused, letting the words settle. As a child, I grew up in a neighborhood where dreams often felt like luxuries. But the Carter Community Center gave me something priceless: access. Access to computers, access to learning, and access to hope. A slideshow appeared on the screen behind her, images of the newly renovated center, children typing on computers, volunteers teaching small groups of students. The crowd murmured softly as they took in the transformation. When I stepped back into that center for the first time in years, Maya continued, I saw what it could be: a place to inspire, teach, and lift children who deserve so much more. We created modern tech labs, coding workshops, and mentorship programs that give kids the tools to build their futures. Today, enrollment is full, and those children are learning skills that will carry them into college, careers, and beyond. She looked out at the audience, her gaze steady. This model can be replicated. Community centers are more than buildings. They are lifelines. And with the right investment, we can create spaces that empower the next generation, spaces where children can dream bigger than their circumstances. The applause that followed was genuine and loud, filling the cavernous room. As Maya stepped back from the podium, several officials approached her, shaking her hand and congratulating her. Jeremy grinned from the side of the stage, giving her a triumphant nod. In the days that followed, Maya's phone rang off the hook. State officials wanted to know how they could partner with her to bring similar programs to other struggling neighborhoods. Business leaders offered funding. Foundations reached out, interested in scaling her community initiatives. Sitting in her office one evening, Maya leaned back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. She scrolled through her email inbox, filled with messages from educators and parents thanking her for her work. One email caught her eye. Subject: You changed our lives. Dear Ms. Thompson, I wanted to thank you for what you've done at the Carter Community Center. My son, Marcus, just started the coding program, and I've never seen him so excited about learning. He comes home every day talking about what he's built. For the first time, he's talking about going to college. He's starting to believe in himself, and so am I. With gratitude, a grateful parent. Maya's chest tightened, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She sat there in the quiet of her office, holding on to the words. For years, her life had been about proving herself in spaces where she felt like she didn't belong. But this was different. This was impact. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Jeremy poked his head in, a grin spreading across his face. What do you say we call it a night? Maya chuckled, wiping her eyes discreetly. You're right, it's late. Jeremy glanced at her desk, his expression softening. You know, you're doing something pretty special here. Don't lose sight of that. Maya nodded, her heart full. I won't. As she stood and gathered her things, Maya paused to glance at Olivia's drawing once more. She traced the image of the girl with wings, standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to fly. The ripples were spreading, just as Henry Dawson had said they would. And for the first time, Maya realized she wasn't just lifting others, she was growing too. The best was yet to come. The day was unusually warm for late fall, the kind of day where sunlight filtered through the clouds and settled softly over the city. Maya Thompson stood at the edge of the Carter Community Center's courtyard, taking in the bustling scene in front of her. The center was alive, truly alive, with the hum of possibility. Children dashed across the yard, chasing each other with carefree laughter. Groups of teenagers sat at picnic tables, sketching ideas on notepads, surrounded by volunteers discussing coding projects and tech labs. Parents, many of whom had once been kids here themselves, mingled nearby, chatting with teachers and mentors. Maya tucked her hands into the pockets of her coat, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the community gather. This was no longer just about a building or a program. It was a movement, a wave of hope stretching beyond the center's walls. Jeremy walked up beside her, hands clasped behind his back, a grin tugging at his lips. You look happy, boss. I am, Maya said simply, her gaze lingering on a group of kids huddled around a volunteer holding up a robotics kit. It's starting to feel real now, like this is bigger than me. Jeremy nodded. It is bigger than you. That's what makes it special. He paused, nudging her lightly. Speaking of special, you've got someone waiting for you inside. She said you'd know her when you saw her. Maya frowned slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Who? Jeremy shrugged, his grin widening. Go see for yourself. The center's newly renovated tech lab was warm and bright, sunlight spilling through freshly cleaned windows onto rows of gleaming computers. Maya's heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. At the far end of the lab stood a woman with her back to her, peering at a student's screen. The woman's shoulders were slightly hunched, her gray hair pulled back into a bun. It took Maya only a moment to recognize her. Ms. Monroe? The older woman turned, her face breaking into a wide smile. Maya. Maya walked toward her, surprised but happy to see her former teacher. You didn't tell me you were coming by. Ms. Monroe chuckled, the sound soft and familiar. Well, I wanted to see this place with my own eyes. I heard about the programs, the students, but hearing and seeing are two very different things. Maya gestured around the room, pride evident in her voice. What do you think? Ms. Monroe looked around, her sharp eyes lingering on each computer, each bright-eyed student, each volunteer, leaning down to explain commands. Finally, she turned back to Maya, her voice soft but full of meaning. It's extraordinary. You've done something incredible here. Maya shifted slightly, her throat tightening with emotion. I had help, she said quietly. People like you, who believed in me when I didn't know how to believe in myself. Ms. Monroe reached out, placing a warm hand on Maya's arm. Believing in you was the easy part, Maya. You were always going to make it, you just needed someone to remind you that you could. Maya's chest tightened further, and for a moment she felt like a child again, sitting in Ms. Monroe's classroom, soaking up every ounce of encouragement. "Come with me," Maya said, her voice soft. They stepped into the quiet of the main hallway, where posters and student artwork adorned the walls. Maya led Miss Monroe to a small display just outside the tech lab. At its center hung a framed photo, one of Maya as a child, seated at a bulky old computer in the very same building. She was frowning in concentration, her small hands hovering over the keyboard. Beneath the photo, a brass plaque read, "In honor of Patricia Monroe, whose belief in young minds changed lives." Ms. Monroe froze, her hand rising instinctively to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears as she stared at the plaque, the weight of the gesture settling over her. "Maya, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Maya replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't be here without you, and I wanted everyone who walks through these halls to know the impact one teacher can make." Ms. Monroe reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the plaque as tears spilled quietly down her cheeks. After a long moment, she turned to Maya, her voice trembling. "I've spent my whole life trying to lift others up, and I never imagined that someone would do this for me." Maya smiled faintly, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "You deserve it. You gave me wings before I knew how to use them." Miss Monroe pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. For a moment, Maya let herself sink into it, letting the years of gratitude she had carried settle into the embrace. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Maya walked through the now quiet center. The day's activities had wound down, the last of the families heading home with smiles and stories to share. Volunteers packed up supplies, their laughter echoing softly down the halls. Maya paused in the tech lab doorway, watching as Olivia sat at one of the computers, her face lit by the glow of the screen. The girl typed furiously, her braids bouncing with each movement, completely immersed in her work. Beside her, one of the mentors leaned down, offering quiet words of encouragement. Maya smiled, her chest warm with a familiar ache. She remembered what it felt like to sit in that very chair, to look at the blinking cursor on the screen and see endless possibilities stretching out in front of her. Olivia suddenly turned, catching sight of Maya in the doorway. She grinned and waved, her eyes bright with excitement. "Ms. Thompson, I figured out how to make the robot move." Maya laughed softly, stepping into the room. "Did you now?" Olivia nodded eagerly. "Want to see?" "Of course I do," Maya said, crouching beside her. As Olivia launched the program, a small robot rolled across the desk, its wheels whirring as it completed its first successful movement. The girl clapped her hands, beaming. "I did it! I really did it!" "You did," Maya said softly, her heart full. "You're amazing, Olivia." The little girl looked up at her, eyes wide with wonder. "One day, I want to be like you." Maya felt her throat tighten. She smiled, reaching out to gently squeeze Olivia's shoulder. "You'll be even better than me." That night, as Maya sat alone in her office back in New York, she opened her notebook, the same one she had carried on her trip to Zurich, the one filled with notes, plans, and dreams. She flipped to a fresh page, picked up her pen, and began to write. "You don't always see the impact of the ripples you create. Sometimes they spread quietly, touching lives you'll never know. But every act of kindness, every moment of belief, every small effort matter. Because when you teach someone to dream, you give them wings. And when you give them wings, they'll learn how to fly." Maya leaned back in her chair, the weight of everything she had built settling over her. The Carter Community Center was more than a project now. It was a legacy, one that would outlast her, one that would continue to grow. For so long she had believed success was measured by how far you could rise. But now she knew the truth. Success was measured by how many others you could lift along the way. As she closed her notebook and gazed out at the city lights, Maya smiled softly to herself. The ripples were still spreading, and they always would. Because kindness, hope, and belief, those were the things that truly changed the world. Maya Thompson stood outside the Carter Community Center one last time, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting soft shadows across the neighborhood. The air was quiet now, the day's laughter and energy finally settling into a peaceful stillness. The sign above the door, "A Place to Dream," shimmered faintly in the fading light, like a quiet promise to all who passed through its doors. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of everything she had accomplished settle over her. She had come full circle from a little girl with dreams too big for her circumstances to a woman who had made those dreams a reality, not just for herself, but for others. The center was no longer just a building. It was a beacon of hope, of opportunity, and of belief. As she turned to leave, Maya caught sight of Olivia's bright eyes in one of the windows, a notebook in her hand, and a determined look on her face. Maya smiled softly. This was just the beginning for Olivia, and for all the children like her. You taught me how to fly. And now, it was their turn. If this story inspired you and reminded you of the power of kindness, resilience, and hope, then be sure to subscribe to our channel. We share stories like this one to uplift, motivate, and bring light to the world. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next incredible story of strength, community, and triumph. If you enjoyed this tale, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and let us know what dreams you're chasing. Together, we can create ripples that make the world a better place. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.